Hello everybody, my name is Eric Calderon. I'm studying Lengua Inglesa. I'm in 7th semester. And today I want to talk to you about something that is really interesting for me and has helped me a lot. And actually I didn't know this, I would say like 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But this was the factor that actually got me into reading and made reading more fun for me. I'm talking about intertextuality, which I know sounds maybe familiar for some, and for some it's just completely unknown. This is something we've seen in the major. It's something I learned more about in the major, and when I realized this and I want to learn this in class, it made a lot of sense for me. Basically, intertextuality, in very simple terms, in terms that are not complicated, intertextuality is taking somebody's work, it could be a movie, a song, a book, a poem, a work, and putting it into another. And maybe it's a little confusing. Let me give you an example. Stranger Things is a series that pretty much everybody knows about. Maybe you've watched it, maybe you haven't, but it's a series everybody knows about. It's a Netflix series. It's been going on for 3 seasons now. And Stranger Things is a great example nowadays of intertextuality, and they take advantage of intertextuality. And you can see it in the series with the kids. Even if you haven't watched the TV series, there's this episode in which it's Halloween and they're dressing up. And what they do is that these kids, this group of friends, they dress up as the Ghostbusters from the movie Ghostbusters. And that is intertextuality. And it's really fascinating for me because you can watch it and be like, oh, that's a nice reference. But it's not only a reference, because it's telling you something. So intertextuality, when it's done correctly and in a good way, it's gonna be telling something to the reader or the viewer or the listener, whoever is consuming that media is gonna be telling you something. So what is telling us in Stranger Things with the Ghostbusters? Let's say you're someone who has never watched the TV series, and this is the first episode because you get to a house with a friend who's watching this episode, and you just start watching and you see this group of kids who dressed up as the Ghostbusters. If you're familiar with the Ghostbusters, which I would say most people are, even if they haven't watched the movie again, they know the Ghostbusters. They know that there was this group of people, these men who would fight against ghosts and demons, and they would catch them, and that's the whole plot of the movie, basically. But that's what we know. It's a group of people, a group of men who gather and fight evil together. And just by watching these kids dress up as the Ghostbusters, what they're telling you, the creators of this TV series, without you knowing anything about the story, is these kids are friends, and these kids are going to be fighting evil. It could be physical evil, it could be psychological. I mean, that depends on the series. But the thing is, they're telling us something without them having to say it. So this is really interesting because intertextuality is something we can use in our own writings, in our own projects, and makes it more interesting for people. And it's a tool we can use to say a lot without having to say it. In this case, the creators, what they're doing is using something most people are familiar with, and they're just using it in their favor. So they're saying, instead of having a character saying, oh, you're a group of kids who are very united and who spend a lot of time together, and you're friends, and you're probably going to be fighting evil, which would be very awkward for a character to say, or even of the kids, one of the kids to say that. What do? They dress them up as a group of people or characters who we are already familiar with, who already did the same thing the creators are going to make them do. So by having this reference, we know something about these kids. We know probably what they're going to be doing. The least we know is they're friends, and they're going to stick together, and probably they're going to be fighting something in whichever form it comes. And so that's very familiar to us. There's this movie that came out this year called Ready Player One. This one is different. This one is set in the future because Stranger Things is set in the 80s. So all these references for them, for the characters, are happening. For us, it's retro. For us, it's in the past. But for them, it's present, right? So we see them talking about music. We see them referencing TV shows. We see them referencing movies. And part of it is nostalgia. So it plays the nostalgia factor. And you're seeing this, and for you it's, oh, that's so cool. For them it's like new, and they're just seeing this, and it's the first part of a movie we already know the whole story of. So that's cool. That's a cool factor. Intertextuality is not so much about nostalgia, but it's telling you something, like with the Ghostbusters. And we can see it, as I was saying, in the movie Ready Player One. We have this movie which is all about, it's in the future, and it's all about this kid who's looking for a treasure hidden in a virtual world. It's not the real world. It's this virtual world that was created by this figure who is basically Steve Jobs in this world, and he created this whole virtual world, and he has hidden some keys. He has hidden some secrets in this world. So this kid, the way to find these keys is to know the creator and know the things he liked. And because he lived in the 80s, the kid, even though he's living in the future, he's very acquainted with movies from the 80s and music from the 80s and video games from the 80s that the creator liked. So we see intertextuality there too, although I think it's also playing the nostalgia factor. In our major, for example, we see this all the time. There's this great book I read a while back called How to Read Literature Like a College Professor. And one of the tips it gave, in 3 chapters I think it's divided in, talking about how literature, the classics we know now, in our literature classes, what we're gonna see is these classics and these very famous authors, poems, essays, novels, short stories. And in English, those that are written in English originally, most of them are gonna be referencing 3 things. They're gonna be referencing the Bible, they're gonna be referencing Shakespeare, and they're gonna be referencing the Greek mythology. So if you're acquainted with all those 3, you're gonna be able to see often intertextuality. And a way we can just say, I'm sure you've seen it, like when you say, oh, that's from the Bible, that's intertextuality, and what it's giving you, it's a whole context and a whole story without the author saying something. It's just like, instead of explaining to you that this character is evil, a way we could use it, instead of telling you, oh, this character is really bad, this character seems to be in favor of the main character, it seems to be helping them, but actually it's just gonna be the villain, and it's gonna be sneaky, and it's not gonna help them. A great way to do that and to explain that to the reader without us having to explain that, literally saying it with words, is just saying this person or this character was the serpent in their garden. So what we're doing is we're pulling from the Bible. We're saying we know the story of the Bible, Genesis. We know the snake is not a good figure. We know it's gonna deceive Adam and Eve. And we don't have to explain any of that because people already know that. So intertextuality saying, oh, he was the serpent in their garden, is a few words, but it's telling you a whole story because there's a whole story behind that. And so that's a tool and a resource we can use in our poems, in our videos, in our podcasts, whatever you're doing. Intertextuality is key and it's helping you. The way I discovered this, when I was a kid, when I was telling you 12 years ago, 11 years ago, I was reading a book for school. I didn't like reading that much. But there was this story, the book was this novel about a kid who was an orphan, and he was just struggling through life, and he was about to go on an adventure. And then this morning he's taking a shower, and you can read this in the book. He's just taking a shower and he's singing in the shower. And the author says he was singing "Staying Alive" by the Bee Gees. And when I read it, I was like, oh, that's fine. I know that song. It's interesting. Later on, my teacher explained to us, and he made us look at the lyrics of the song, saying he's literally telling you the character is singing, "I'm staying alive." So what he's telling us about the character, even though he's happily singing the song in the shower, to the reader, we should be like, pay attention, because it's telling you he's struggling through life. His life is not easy, and he's feeling like he's barely staying alive. And for me, it was like, it blew my head off. It was like, so there's like these hidden things that if I looked at them and if I know them, it's gonna make the reading experience a lot better. And since then, every time I read something, I'm looking for those references, like those Easter eggs, because it makes the reading experience a lot more richer. It's better if you know this when you're reading something, it's gonna help you understand better. So I hope it was interesting for you. For me, it has been really interesting. Intertextuality is something you should look more into and just pay attention when you're reading. Thank you.